Welcome to the American Indian Vocational Rehabilitation Services pre-application webinar. Assistance listing number ALN 84.250Q. My name is Adrian Rodriguez, one of the program officers for the American Indian Vocational Rehabilitation Services AIVRS program, and I'm the moderator for this presentation. This pre-recorded informational webinar is designed to provide technical assistance to the interested applicants for grants under the Rehabilitation Service Administration's RSA's AIVRS program competition under ALN 84.250Q. Specifically, this webinar is designed to highlight pertinent information from the Notice Inviting Applications, NIA, to assist the applicant's understanding of this competition. The recording is designed to supplement the relevant material associated with the competition for which you are applying. Please note that the competition will contain an application kit that will provide additional information about the program. We invite all prospective applicants to access this recording along with their teams responsible for developing program and financial components of the application. Presentation overview. This is an on-demand recording to help prepare applicants for the AIVRS 84.250Q grant competition in the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services, OSERS, Rehabilitation Services Administration, RSA's office. It will include a brief overview of what is contained in the entire application kit, a more detailed review of the NIA, and additional information and resources. Understanding the application kit. The application kit is divided into 10 sections, A through J. The first section is the Dear Applicant letter, which introduces the purpose of the program and highlights some important aspects of the competition and the program. Immediately after the Dear Applicant letter is the NIA, which we will go over in detail in this recording. After the NIA and the selection criteria for the application, the Secretary uses the selection criteria taken from 34 CFR 75.210 to evaluate applications for new grants. Following the selection criteria is the special application requirements for the AIVRS program grants that can be found in 34 CFR 371.21A through K. We'll discuss this in some detail in this webinar. The program statute and regulations section is next in the kit. The application transmittal instructions section of the kit, there are specific instructions on submission procedures, as well as helpful reminders. Please review this section closely. The following section is the application abstract instructions. A one-page project abstract is required with the application. The next section is the application forms. This includes instructions for the Federal Assistance Application page SF424, the budget narrative ED 524, the program narrative, the grant application form for project objectives and performance measures information, and assurances, certifications, and disclosures. Section I lists the important notices to all applicants. The notices include a new provision in the Department of Education's General Education Provisions Act. GEPA, Section 427 of GEPA, affects applicants of new grant awards under this program. This section also includes the estimated burden statement for GEPA requirements and the program performance measures under the Government Performance and Results Act, GPRA. Finally, Section J has additional information. The applicant checklist, common questions and answers, program application indirect cost instructions, and the unique entity identifier instructions are included in these pages. Please review each of these sections thoroughly and contact the competition manager with any questions. Overview of the NIA. The purpose of this program is to provide vocational rehabilitation VR services including culturally appropriate services to American Indians with disabilities who reside on or near federal or state reservations, consistent with such eligible individuals' strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice, so that such individual may prepare for and engage in high quality employment that will increase opportunities for economic self sufficiency. Overview of the NIA Competitive Preference Priority. In making new awards under this program, RSA gives priority to applications for the continuation of programs that have been previously funded under the AIVRS program. An additional 5 points are awarded to an application that meets this priority. Overview of NIA award information. The type of award, discretionary grants. The estimated available funds, $28,503,407. An estimated number of awards, 44. The project period, up to 60 months. Contingent upon the availability of funds and the quality of applications, we may make additional awards in FY 2024 from the list of unfunded applications from this competition. The department is not bound by any estimates in this notice. Overview of NIA eligibility information. Applications may be made only by Indian tribes and consortia of those Indian tribes located on federal and state reservations. The definition of Indian tribe in Section 719B of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 as amended is, quote, any federal or state Indian tribe, band, rancheria, pueblo, colony, or community, including any Alaskan Native village or regional village corporation, as defined in or established pursuant to the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act and the tribal organization as defined in Section 4.1 of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act 25 USC 450B1, end quote. Reservation is defined in 34 CFR 371.6 as a federal or state Indian reservation, public domain Indian allotment, former Indian reservation in Oklahoma, land held by incorporated Native groups, regional corporations, and village corporations under the provisions of the Alaskan Native Claims Settlement Act, or a defined area of land recognized by a state or federal government where there is a concentration of tribal members and on which the tribal government is providing structured activities and services. The applicant for an AIVRS grant must be the governing body of an Indian tribe, either on behalf of the Indian tribe or on behalf of a consortium of Indian tribes, or the tribal organization that is a separate legal organization that is not governing body of an Indian tribe. In order to receive an AIVRS grant, the tribal organization that is not a governing body of an Indian tribe must have as one of its functions the vocational rehabilitation of American Indians with disabilities and have the approval of the tribe to be served by such an organization. If a grant is made to the governing body of an Indian tribe, either on its own behalf or on behalf of a consortium, or to a tribal organization to perform services benefiting more than one Indian tribe, the approval of each such Indian tribe shall be a prerequisite to the making of such a grant. Overview of the NIA. Cost sharing. Cost sharing or matching is the portion of project program costs not borne by the federal government. The terms are used interchangeably, and for this program, refer to the statutorily specified percentage of 10% of the total project costs of the project that must be contributed by the grant applicant in order to be eligible for funding. Any and all cost sharing promised by the grantee in its application must be fully documented and accounted for in the grantee's expenditure records and reports. Applications submitted for funding must include the specified costs or contributions proposed to meet the matching or cost sharing requirements, the source of the cost sharing, and in the case of in kind contributions, a description of how the value was determined for the donated or contributed services or goods. Cost share waiver. If an applicant can demonstrate that they do not have sufficient resources to contribute to the non federal share of the cost of the project, the applicant may request a waiver in part or in whole to the cost sharing requirement in accordance with Section 121A of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the implementing regulations at 34 CFR 371.40C. Overview of NIA subgrantees. A grantee under this competition may not award subgrants to entities to directly carry out project activities described in its application. While subgrants are not permitted under 34 CFR 371.42A, grantees are permitted to provide the vocational rehabilitation services by contract or otherwise enter into an agreement with the designated state unit, DSU, a community rehabilitation program, or another agency to assist in the implementation of the tribal vocational rehabilitation program, as long as such agreement is identified in the application. Overview of the NIA application and submission information. For information on how to submit an application, please refer to our common instructions for applicants to Department of Education discretionary grant programs published in the Federal Registrar. RSA invites an applicant to indicate whether it intends to consolidate its AIVRS grant funds into a current or future 477 plan in accordance with the provisions under Public Law 11593, the Indian Employment Training Related Service Consolidation Act of 2017, 25 USC 3401. Any request to consolidate AIVRS funds into a 477 plan must be made separately to the United States Department of Interior. See the NIA for contact information. Application review information, selection criteria. The selection criteria for this competition, with the maximum score of 100 points, are as follows. Need for project significance, 10 points. Quality of the project design, 20 points. Quality of project services, 20 points. Quality of project personnel, 15 points. Adequacy of resources, 10 points. Quality of management plan, 15 points. Quality of project evaluation, 10 points. The selection criteria detail can be found in the NIA. Application review information, review and selection process. We remind potential applicants that in reviewing applications in any discretionary grant competition, the Secretary may consider, under 34 CFR 75.217D3, the past performance of the applicant in carrying out a previous award, such as the applicant's use of funds, achievement of project objectives, and compliance with grant conditions. The Secretary may also consider whether the applicant failed to submit a timely performance report or submitted a report of unacceptable quality. In addition, in making a competitive grant award, the Secretary requires various assurances, including those applicable to federal civil rights laws that prohibit discrimination in programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance from the Department. Application review information, risk and assessment, and special conditions. Consistent with 2 CFR 200.205, before awarding grants under this competition, the department conducts a review of the risks posed by applicants. Under 2 CFR 3474.10, the Secretary may impose specific conditions and, in appropriate circumstances, high risk conditions on the grant if the applicant or grantee is not financially stable, has a history of unsatisfactory performance, has a financial or other management system that does not meet the standards of 2 CFR Part 200, Subpart D, has not fulfilled the conditions of a prior grant, or is otherwise not responsible. Application review information, special application requirements. Applicants for the AIVRS program grant must provide assurances that they will meet the special application requirements stated at 34 CFR and 371.21A through K. Each application will be reviewed by the Department of Education to determine whether the applicant has provided the required assurances. Listed in the application kit are the special application requirements at 34 CFR and 371.2A through K, explanatory notes, and instructions for the content of the required assurance statements. You must provide the assurance statements in a separate section of your application entitled Special Application Requirements. An application is not complete without the special application requirements and will not be considered for review without the completed form submitted by the applicant. Application review information, integrity and performance system. If you are selected under this competition to receive an award that over the course of the project period may exceed the simplified acquisition threshold, currently 250,000, under 2 CFR 200.205A2, we must make a judgment about your integrity, business ethics, and record of performance under federal awards. That is, the risk posed by you as an applicant before we make an award. In doing so, we must consider any information about you that is in the Integrity and Performance System, currently referred to as the Federal Awardee Performance and Integrity Information System, FAPIS, accessible through the System for Award Management, SAM.gov. You may review and comment on any information about yourself that a federal agency previously entered and that is currently in FAPIS. Please note, if the total value of your currently active grants, cooperative agreements, and procurement contracts from the federal government exceeds $10 million, the reporting requirements in 2 CFR Part 200, Appendix 12 require you to report certain integrity information to FAPIS semi-annually. Please review the requirements in 2 CFR 200, Appendix 12, if this grant plus all the other federal funds you receive exceed $10 million. Award administration information. Award notices. If your application is successful, we notify your U.S. representative and U.S. senators and send you a grant award notification, GAN. Or we may send you an email containing a link to access an electronic version of your GAN. We may also notify you informally. If your application is not evaluated or not selected for funding, we notify you. Administrative and national policy requirements. We identify administrative and national policy requirements in the application package and reference these and other requirements in the applicable regulations section of this notice. We reference the regulations outlining the terms and conditions of an award in the applicable regulations section of this notice and include these and other specific conditions in the GAN. The GAN also incorporates your approved application as part of your binding commitments under the grant. Award administration information. Reporting. If you apply for a grant under this competition, you must ensure that you have in place the necessary processes and systems to comply with the reporting requirements in 2 CFR Part 170, should you receive funding under the competition. This does not apply if you have an exception under 2 CFR 170.110B. At the end of your project period, you must submit a final performance report, including financial information as directed by the Secretary. If you receive a multi-year award, you must submit an annual performance report that provides the most current performance and financial expenditure information as directed by the Secretary under 34 CFR 75.118. The Secretary may also require more frequent performance reports under 34 CFR 75.720C. Award administration information. Performance measures. Under the Government Performance and Results Act of 1993, GPRA, the department has established 4 performance measures for the AIVRS program. The measures are A, of all those exiting the program, the percentage of individuals who leave the program with an employment outcome after receiving services under an IPE. B1, the percentage of individuals who leave the program with an employment outcome after receiving services under an IPE. 2, the percentage of individuals who leave the program without an employment outcome after receiving services under an IPE. 3, the percentage of individuals who have not left the program and are continuing to receive services under an IPE. C, the percentage of projects that demonstrate an average annual cost per employment outcome of no more than $35,000. And D, the percentage of projects that demonstrate an average annual cost of services per participant of no more than $10,000. Each grantee must annually report the data needed to measure its performance on the GPRA measures through the annual performance reporting form for the AIVRS program. Note, for the purposes of this section, the term employment outcome means with respect to an individual, A, entering or retaining full-time or, if appropriate, part-time competitive employment in the integrated labor market. B, satisfying the vocational outcome of supportive employment. Or C, satisfying any other vocational outcome the Secretary of Education may determine to be appropriate, including satisfying the vocational outcome of customized employment, self-employment, telecommuting, or business ownership. Award administration information, continuation awards. In making a continuation award under 34 CFR 75.253, the Secretary considers, among other things, whether a grantee has made substantial progress in achieving the goals and objectives of the project, whether the grantee has expended funds in a manner that is consistent with its approved application and budget, and if the Secretary has established performance measurement requirements, the performance targets in the grantee's approved application. In making a continuation award, the Secretary also considers whether the grantee is operating in compliance with the assurances in its approved application, including those applicable to federal civil rights laws that prohibit discrimination in programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance from the department. Other information. Individuals with disabilities can obtain this document and a copy of the application package in an accessible format upon request to the program contact listed under for further information. Contact. If you use a TDD or a TTY, call the Federal Relay Service at 711. The official version of this document is the document published in the Federal Registrar. Rehabilitation Service Administration discretionary grant information. This page contains informational recordings and accompanying handouts for applicants interested in applying for discretionary grants funded through the Rehabilitation Service Administration. Please note that the section on general information for RSA discretionary grant competitions includes an accompanying handout highlighting pertinent information that generally applies across discretionary grant programs funded through RSA. Reminders. The program authority and applicable regulations are important to understand allowable and unallowable activities and costs under the AIVRS program for which you are applying. The time of the application deadline is 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the application deadline date. This allows all applicants, no matter where they are located, to have a full business day to submit their application. Assistance from the principal office staff is available until 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the application deadline date. A few more reminders. Register early. Grants.gov may take 5 or more business days to complete. Submit early. Don't wait until the last day to submit your application. Grants.gov will put a date timestamp on your application and then process it after it is fully uploaded. Verify that submission was accepted. Verify that grants.gov received your submission on time and that it was validated successfully. Competition manager contact. August Martin is the competition manager for this grant competition. Please contact him with any questions. If you are deaf, hard of hearing, or have a speech disability and wish to access telecommunications relay services, please dial 711. This concludes our presentation. Thank you.